So guys, when it comes to the thread cancellation, there are actually two types of cancellation, the asynchronous cancellation and the deferred cancellation, right? So first we will going to discuss asynchronous cancellation in detail, and then after that we will going to discuss deferred cancellation. In order to understand deferred cancellation, it is important that we understand asynchronous cancellation. Deferred cancellation has been introduced so as to address the drawbacks or pitfalls which comes with asynchronous mode of cancellation of threads. So let us discuss asynchronous cancellation first, and then we will discuss deferred cancellation. So first of all, let us understand that what cancellation is. So in the diagram you can see that we have a process P which has two threads, thread T1 and thread T2, right? And both the threads are executing their respective execution flows independently. Now let us suppose that at time t is equal to 0, the thread T1 is executing at some instruction P1 in its execution flow, right? And the thread T2 is executing at instruction P2 in its execution flow, right? So this is happening at time t is equal to 0. Now let us suppose that thread T1 wants to cancel the thread T2, right? So while executing at point P1, let us say that thread T1 sends cancellation request to the thread T2, right? Now note that pthread_cancel is an API which is used to cancel a thread, right? We will discuss how to use this API when we will be discussing code, but first let us focus on understanding the concept. So at time t is equal to 0 at instruction P1, let us say that the thread T1 sends cancellation request to the thread T2, right? And at time t is equal to 0, the thread T2 was executing in its execution flow at point P2, right? So when any thread generates the cancellation request to cancel some other thread of the same process, that cancellation request is queued internally by our operating system, right? It is not delivered to the target thread instantly, meaning that target thread instantly is not cancelled. Now having received this cancellation request, the operating system is now looking at an opportunity to terminate the thread T2, right? Your operating system may or may not terminate the thread instantly, and it is what is the meaning of asynchronous here, right? As soon as the thread T1 generates cancellation request, it is not necessary that at that very moment of time the thread T2 will be cancelled, right? You can see that this cancellation request is queued by your operating system, and then your operating system looks for an opportunity to deliver this cancellation signal to the target thread. Here target thread is the thread T2, right? Now let us suppose that at time t is equal to delta t, right? The operating system delivers the cancel signal to your target thread T2, which results in T2 termination instantly, right? So let us suppose that at time t is equal to delta t, your target thread T2 was executing the point P3 in its execution flow, right? So it means that the thread T2 receives the cancellation signal when it was executing point P3 in its execution flow. So when thread T2 is terminated, it may be executing at some point P3, which may not exactly the point P2, a point where the thread cancellation request was generated by a thread T1, right? It may take some amount of time for the cancellation request to get delivered to the thread T2, and it is only after delivery of the cancellation request the thread T2 is cancelled, right? So you can see that thread T2 execute from point number P2 to point number P3 while the cancellation request was pending, right? So this is what asynchronous refers to. So this type of cancellation is called asynchronous cancellation. It is not in the programmer's hand that once the cancellation request is generated, then when the operating system would going to deliver this cancellation request to the target thread, right? The operating system may be busy executing some scheduling algorithm or allocating some memory or doing context switching, or it could be busy with anything, right? So operating system put the cancellation request generated by the threads into the queue, and later as soon as the operating system is done with doing some critical task, it puts up the cancellation request from the queue and delivered to the target thread, right? It is only after delivery of the cancellation signal to the target thread that the target thread is eventually cancelled. So this is how asynchronous cancellation works. Now let us discuss a short program in which I will show you how thread cancellation is implemented. After that, we will discuss certain problems with cancelling the threads and how to address those problems.